Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. The month of May highlights mental health awareness. Each year, millions of Americans face the reality of living with mental illness. Being abused in any type of way can affect your mental health significantly. Financial abuse is the use of economic resources to control or hold power over another person. Financial abuse often goes hand in hand with other forms of abuse, such as emotional and physical abuse. Signs of abuse are not always as obvious to those outside of the relationship, and there are also situations where the victim is unaware that they are being financially manipulated. Today, I'll be discussing financial abuse. I'll be joined again by Kim Cole, who is one of Navicore Solutions' community engagement managers. Kim and I will be discussing different types of financial abuse, how to move on from a financially abusive relationship, and resources available to those who have been financially abused. Now, let's get to my interview with Kim. Hi, Kim. Thanks for joining me on the podcast again.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to be here. We're going to talk about financial abuse this month to go along with Mental Health Awareness Month, which is in May. So, financial abuse occurs just as frequently in unhealthy relationships as other forms of abuse. It might not be highlighted as much as a physical abuse or mental abuse. So, what is financial abuse?
So financial abuse is a form of domestic abuse that involves essentially preventing someone from acquiring what they need to be self-sufficient. It's an extremely powerful way of keeping a victim trapped inside of a relationship by basically controlling the money and the finances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And there's also, there's different types of financial abuse as well. So do you want to maybe talk about some of the different types of financial abuse?
Sure. I mean, there is a number of different kinds of financial abuse. Some of the most common are like when an abuser takes over the finances and refuses to give their partner access to bank accounts or money. Some of the abuser may prevent the victim from having a job or sabotages their current employment. It's usually in an effort to keep them from earning their own income. Abusers may also make an effort to destroy a victim's credit, kind of preventing them from being able to obtain certain things. And even just opening accounts in victims' names and then refuses to pay for them. The worst situation, though, Katie, that I have ever seen when it came to financial abuse was an abuser working with a loan officer to take a mortgage out in the spouse's name. And then was not paying on the mortgage very often. It destroyed her credit. It just was a nightmare to unravel. And it really can get that big.
Yeah. And I definitely think it's important to note that it happens just not in like romantic relationships. I mean, it could happen in career workplace relationships as well. It can happen to seniors a lot. Senior financial abuse is very common because, the elderly are particularly susceptible to financial abuse. So,
absolutely. Absolutely. It's unfortunately a phenomenon that we have seen take on many different roles and affect different individuals and different groups. And, when seniors are dependent upon someone else to take care of their needs, makes them more vulnerable. And this really is about power, Katie. This is not about the desire to own more things. This is about holding the power.
Yeah, no, definitely. Exactly. And I think that is why seniors are susceptible to it too, because, they might not even realize that their assets are even being stolen because it could be someone they trust taking it, or, it's easy to coerce them. So, it can happen to anybody, really, financial abuse. So what tactics can an instigator use to financially abuse someone?
Well, one of the biggest tactics that they can use is concealing. They're
Mhm.
hiding things. So they're hiding important information, financial information, everything from hiding the mail to just not disclosing certain things. We find a lot where the one of the tactics may be giving the victim in this scenario a very small allowance to live on, and then requiring them to account for like every dime they have spent,
Mhm.
or only allowing them to use the money on certain things. We see that a lot too with seniors as well, where it really is about giving them very small allowances.
Mhm.
Can be frightening.
Yeah, no, definitely. And if it can also happen if you're a financial abuser can also maybe spend your money without your knowledge. That can happen with
Hmm.
seniors, but that can also happen in a relationship. Or if you are in a relationship, you might be being financial abuse if they have all the control of the finances and they don't let you have a say in anything. So there
Correct.
are definitely a lot of ways you might not even realize you're being financially abused. So those are, we kind of touched on this a little bit about some signs that you're being financially abused. Like, how can you tell that you are being financially abused since it's not, you might not be looking for it?
Sure. I mean, like we mentioned before, if the abuser in this relationship, whether it be romantic or a senior relationship, or one where someone is caring for somebody that is maybe mentally ill, or may not be able to care for themselves, what we often see is um, things like requiring the victim to account for every dime that they spending, like you had mentioned, spending money without the
Mm-hmm.
victim's knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. Or threatening to cut off the victim financially, like if they don't agree with what they're saying or they don't
Mm-hmm.
go along with what they want. Just, really nasty threats.
Yeah. And definitely, and you should also be checking your credit cards and your credit reports and your credit score and everything, because that could be a telltale sign you might be being financially abused as well. You might think something is maybe wrong on your credit report. And if you look into it and you might figure out, oh, I think I'm being financially abused. So definitely,
Yes.
keep an eye out on your finances to show, and it'll help you show if you are being financially abused. So, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced financial reviews abuse. Do you think the pandemic has created a rise in financial abuse?
Oh, hands down,
Mhm.
absolutely. I think that when we look at some of the studies that have come out regarding abuse during the pandemic, there's a great study done by the Center for Financial Security that stated that 99% of domestic violence cases, those cases reported financial abuse. During the pandemic, there were reports of domestic violence numbers increasing by more than
Oh
33%.
wow. Hmm.
So if we already know that during the pandemic, there was already an increase in all different kinds of abuses, we can guarantee that there was a significant rise in financial abuse.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, like people were spending more time together. So obviously more time than they had been spending before. So they might have felt easier to abuse somebody because of that. And also I was thinking maybe because since stimulus checks came out, maybe
Mhm.
your partner thought, well, maybe I can control the whole stimulus check or everything, or control your stimulus check if you're not married and take that from you. So there were definitely a lot of opportunities to financially abuse your partner more during the pandemic, I think.
Oh, and Katie, I think that needs to be added to that, in
Hmm.
addition to what you just said, was
Hmm.
that stress was very
Yeah,
high,
definitely.
and it would have caused behaviors in certain people that you may have never seen before.
Hmm.
People who may have experienced loss of job,
Yeah.
and therefore loss of identity, now maybe coming back and looking for that level of control, and not being what would be labeled as a typical abuser.
Mhm.
So I think that there's a lot that goes into that, but without a shadow of a doubt, there's definitely an increase across the board.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point to make too about losing your job, because somebody could have been in a job where they're used to being the boss and the controller, and they might not have ever showed signs before of this in their relationship, but now they might not have anyone to control at their job, so they're taking it out on their partner. So yeah, definitely the pandemic has definitely created a rise in financial abuse for sure. And something else that happened because of the pandemic is people are experiencing just mental health issues more now than ever, or they might have had them before, but they might have not have come to light since the pandemic. So mental health crisis is also on the rise with financial abuse. But what impact does financial abuse have on your mental health?
Actually, it has a pretty significant impact. Um, I like studies because they kind of give you
Right.
a very black and white picture. But there was this great study that was done in Canada recently that victims of financial abuse actually showed post-traumatic stress disorder 7 times higher than just in traditional abusive relationships. Once you introduced the financial abuse, the numbers for PTSD actually went up significantly.
Mhm.
They also found that economic abuse was the strongest indicator of suicide attempts for
Oh,
women in abusive relationships.
oh
It
wow.
wasn't it wasn't the physical,
Mhm.
and it wasn't even sexual assault. It was the financial abuse. So, we of course we see higher levels of anxiety and fear and stress, and a lot of different scenarios where they end up in kind of an endless loop of abuse, because getting out of an abusive relationship that includes financial abuse is very difficult. But some of these statistics are just, I mean, they're unnerving.
No, yeah, definitely. That's definitely crazy. Yeah, and I was gonna say too, mental health can impact financial abuse because you might feel like guilty around money now because this person might have made you feel guilty. Like, why are you spending that?
Mhm.
And like now this can affect your whole way of thinking about money. And and then it also might give you the lack of ability to believe that you can manage your own finances on your own. And it can just destroy your mental health because mental health and finances do go hand in hand. We've actually talked about this before on the podcast a couple years ago. So I'll put that episode in the
Yes.
description of this podcast as well. So it says 18% of people with mental health problems also have debt problems. So do you think instigators target people with pre-existing mental health problems or pre-existing financial problems because they might be easier targets to them, as terrible as that sounds?
Oh, absolutely. The instigators have a tendency to prey on the most vulnerable populations.
Mhm.
This is almost a high for them to be able to identify the vulnerable within a community. And so, unfortunately, those with the mental health disorders and existing financial issues are indeed more vulnerable.
Right.
They may have more needs, especially depending on the mental health diagnosis.
Mhm.
They may have the need for somebody to step in and help them. And unfortunately, that opens the door for instigators.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in any type of abusive situation, instigators do prey on people who are maybe not all there, who have had previous issues in life because yeah, they are vulnerable and they'll be easier to control.
Mhm.
So, if you have been financially abused, how can that affect you overall in the long run? Your overall life after.
Sure. Financial abuse casts a very long shadow. I mean, it really does. Even when the survivor is able to leave the relationship, and by survivor, again, not necessarily
Mhm.
romantic relationship.
Mhm. Yeah.
But when the survivor is able to leave the relationship, it can take years to repair the financial damage that's been inflicted. Just as we said earlier, I mean, mental and emotional impact can be severe, and the overall recovery can take a substantial amount of time. They're literally rebuilding from scratch. They have to relearn some of the basics, and also work on the confidence that they need to be able to move forward.
Yeah. No, definitely. You basically have to start your life over again and rebuild who you are as a person, which
Mm-hmm.
is it takes a lot for somebody in any type of situation. So,
Yes.
what about economic abuse? Could you maybe describe what that is for the listeners and how does it differ from financial abuse?
Sure. So economic abuse and financial abuse are typically used interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is again about it's that control over the money, the finances. But there is a distinct difference with
Okay.
economic abuse that I think is important to point out.
Yeah.
With economic abuse, it actually includes limiting essential items like food and
Oh,
clothing.
okay.
I mean, that to me is really frightening. I
Mm-hmm.
being in a relationship where somebody is limiting my food as an
Mm-hmm.
abuse technique,
Yeah.
that's horrible. So it really is. It's about denying
Oh,
another
wow.
person, not just the financial aspects, but their overall um, needs, their true needs, such as food and clothing and water and those kind of things.
Yeah. So would the instigator kind of be refusing the person they're abusing? Would they kind of be denying the means also to like improve the person's economic status too, right? Like for them to move
Oh
up
yes.
economically, they're kind of putting like a stop to that.
Oh,
Okay,
without
wow.
question. We see within the economic abuse as well, and that was a good point, Katie, that um, forward progress is absolutely put on hold. Everything from not allowing them to go to school, not
Mm.
allowing
Oh, okay.
them to try to achieve a better job, even allowing them to have a job. So
Okay.
it really does put up
Oh, wow.
really, really incredible barriers.
Yeah, and although economic abuse and financial abuse can severely damage a person, they both remain the number one reasons people return to toxic relationships. So, do you have any advice for someone who wants to move on from a financially abusive partner?
Absolutely. I want to start off by saying that I would never suggest that someone just kind of pack up and leave an abusive
Okay.
relationship without speaking to a professional first.
Okay, yeah.
That's, that's a biggie. But every relationship is different, and the threat of violence is real when you leave an abusive relationship. So you really do need a plan. But once there is a safety plan in place, like you had mentioned earlier, I can't recommend enough. I strongly recommend that they get themselves their credit report from annualcreditreport.com.
Hmm.
This is going to give the survivor an opportunity to see what kind of damage has been inflicted, and be able to really get a look from an economic standpoint, kind of what's going on. I also suggest looking into financial education classes and workshops. Many domestic violence programs throughout the country offer these workshops, and you could usually take them in person or virtually, whatever you're comfortable with. And it'll give an opportunity to learn the basics, to kind of rebuild that foundation, which I think is absolutely imperative. One of the things a lot of people don't think about doing is maybe getting tax returns to see if there is any kind of debt from the government that may be being held
Hmm.
over their head. Also to give them a snapshot into the things that they may not know that they own, like a house. There is a form that you can get right on the IRS website, the 4506, that will allow you to get copies of past year's tax returns. And then lastly, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that there are bank accounts out there or in their names, or that they have old bank accounts that they have no idea what's happened to them while they were in the relationship. You don't need the account number. You can go right into the bank with your ID and your social security number, and the bank can access all of your banking information. So, if you're aware that there may have been a joint account and it was at a particular bank, you can go right into that bank and get the information. And your abuser does not need to know.
Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, so that's definitely some great advice. So don't just pick up and leave. You have to kind of get your bearings and everything. And as you said, talking to a professional can definitely help you get started with leaving the relationship. But after you leave the relationship, can speaking with the professional also help someone regain control of their finances in the aftermath? And if so, how?
Oh my goodness, absolutely.
Mhm.
First of all, anybody that comes out of any kind of toxic relationship should seek out mental
Mhm.
health, just a professional,
Yeah.
just because of the fact that um, the rebuilding of the self-esteem and helping identify what led you to that kind of relationship,
Mhm.
and what may be attractive within you that they found the need to prey on, I
Mhm.
think is all so important. But what it really comes down to in financial abuse is when you're trying to sort out your finances and kind of rebuild your financial home, um, I it's going to be stressful and it's going to be very discouraging at times. So I firmly believe that a mental health professional is the best person to help maintain this self-worth while you're going through this process.
Yeah. And, also like after you've kind of worked with the professional and everything and you feel confident in yourself, how do you proceed with your finances moving forward in new relationships when you're ready to take that next step with someone else?
I think that the first I like to go with the old saying once bitten twice shy. So when you're entering into a new
Hmm.
relationship, you don't want to make the same mistakes.
Right.
I strongly recommend keeping your finances separate. Maintaining your own financial independence can also be empowering. I mean, not could not only just be smart financial practice, but this is your money. This is your identity. Okay. And but you need to look for signs. You really do. I mean, as basic as being discouraged from going to work in the morning. Why are you going to work? You don't need to go to work. Stay here. Those kind
Mm.
of things.
Okay. Hmm.
If the new partner wants access to any of your financial information, that's
Mm.
those are the warning signs that you're back into the same thing, and you need to switch gears pretty quickly.
Mm. So, if you are entering a new relationship with somebody after being financially abused, do you recommend maybe somebody kind of keep their finances to themselves and everything? Especially,
Yes.
even I feel like if you're confident enough to marry that person, maybe like, would you still recommend maybe keeping some things to yourself?
Well,
Just,
I think that um every relationship is going to be different.
Mhm.
And I can speak from personal experience. I had come out of a bad relationship before I met my husband, and when we got married, we absolutely kept everything separate until
Okay.
I was comfortable with blending.
Mm. Okay.
It really, and my husband showed no signs of being any kind of abuser. But for my own mental health, it was important for me to do so.
Okay.
So if that's important, then it's something that you should speak with your new partner about,
Okay.
and hopefully they will support that decision.
Yeah, definitely, talk to the person first. And, like as you said, you don't want to get into the same situation that you were in before. But we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, the 40506, right? So that's one of the resources available for people who are being financially abused. Are there any other resources available for those people? And why is it important to address financial abuse?
Well, what I think is really great right now is with financial abuse being kind of put under the subheadings of domestic violence, senior abuse, and other forms of abuse of vulnerable populations. You can reach out to different hotlines if you find yourself being victimized in one of these relationships. So, for instance, if you are in a romantic relationship, reaching out to the National Domestic Abuse Hotline is
Mhm.
one really great way to get the resources that you need to begin the process of leaving. And if you live in an area where there are advocates or an abuse center, you can go directly to one of those. Um, and I think that really, even reaching out to a mental health professional or even a credit counseling agency like ours,
Mhm.
we may we may just direct you to one of these resources to get you started, but we can definitely play a role in the rebuild.
Mhm. Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say too about, reaching out to a credit counseling company like Navicore. If you're been abused so bad that you have a bunch of debt and everything and your credit is not great, we can, obviously provide you with the resources that we have. And then we can also provide you with some budgeting information and other helpful resources to help you rebuild your life as well. So yeah, I mean, after you take care of your mental health and everything, you're ready to regain control of your own financial life, then reach out to a company like us at Navicore for help with that. And as you said about the US National Domestic Violence Hotline, I will put that in the description of the podcast. So if people are wanting that information, they can get that there as well. But I think that wraps up the podcast for today. Thank you for joining me, Kim, and talking about this important topic.
Thank you for having me. And this really is a very important topic. It's the elephant in the room
Mhm.
in way too many relationships, and it really needs to be pushed to the forefront. So I give you a lot of credit for bringing this out to your
Yeah.
listeners, Katie, because I think it is so important to know about.
Yeah, because it definitely is overlooked. It is. And like we said before, it might not just be in a relationship. It could be through seniors, it could be financially abused. And yeah, it is overlooked. People might not even realize it's happening. So it's good to shine a light on it. And it's not one of our usual podcast topics, but I really thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about it. So thank you for joining me and giving the listeners some information.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Financial abuse is a very effective way of keeping an individual in a relationship or situation. It's important to highlight financial abuse because it's often overlooked compared to other forms of abuse. Not only does financial abuse occur in romantic relationships, but elderly people are also victims of financial abuse. Senior financial abuse can come at the hands of seemingly well meaning caregivers or even the victim's children. Since the pandemic, there's been a significant rise in all types of abuse. Someone who used to control people at work may have gotten laid off, and now they feel the need to control someone, and their partner living with them is the only option. Instigators tend to target and prey on more vulnerable people. If you already have pre existing mental health and financial problems, an instigator is more willing to abuse you financially. It's important to stay on top of your finances and check your credit report regularly. Being in a financially abusive relationship can kick your confidence, but it's still important to leave the relationship. Leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time for a victim. Creating a plan of action well in advance can help mitigate some of the safety hurdles. Talk to a mental health professional before and after you leave the relationship. This will help you get back in the right mental state. If you find yourself in an aftermath of debt, reach out to a nonprofit credit counseling company such as Navicore Solutions to help you get back on the right financial path. It may take several years to gain financial stability, however, the journey will be worth it. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.